Welcome to Global Conversations. My guests tonight are Richard Dillman. He lives not far from me in Yalta. And Victor Hugo Vaca, who is living in the country of Georgia. The topic tonight may not be popular with some of you. It may be very surprising, and it could even be disturbing. We're going to begin talking about the conflict that has been raging in Israel and Gaza, and there's a real danger of it spreading throughout the region and could even lead to World War III. The topic tonight: a false flag. What are the implications? What is the proof? And where is this all going? I'm going to start tonight with my friend, Richard Dillman. Richard, what are your thoughts on what's happening right now between Israel and Palestine?
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me on, Regis. Boy, one of the things, and part of their neuro-linguistic programming is real important here. I don't understand all of it. I'm learning about it, but some of the bullet point narrative that first come out from the news all over it was, was stuff like unprovoked attack. Okay. What's other stuff I got it written down here, but stuff like that, just stuff, kind of unprovoked attack, Israel's 911 kind of, and stuff like that, Hamas, because they were involved, obviously, but really Hamas by Iran. So these are things that are being hammered into the public throughout the world, probably, pretty much. So these are the talking points, and you can draw conclusions in 911 in New York, Osama bin Laden, 19 Saudi hijackers, unprovoked attack. So these are the type of things for 22 years have been hammered into us, and this is just going along with their narrative all the way, that sort of stuff. That's from the beginning of it.
So, Richard, you're convinced, because we've had conversations about this in the past few days, that this is a false flag.
Yes, I am, because I'm just not convinced about it because I think this way. I've just heard numerous people, even Israelis, quite a few Israelis are coming on saying, no, there's no way that could happen. There was so much surveillance, in Gaza there, in the whole area there, that a mouse would have a problem getting through. I'm making a joke there, but really, they had seismographic stuff for foot traffic. A tank can't get through, or they're supposed to knock down one of the fences and bridges with a tractor or something. That would, but I've heard experts, all over saying that there's no, or people like that have been to Gaza saying, no way, there's no way that happened. And especially them getting in 5,000 rockets,
Yeah, and
they shoot rockets before,
Yeah, the other thing is that Israel, for some reason, have moved their army, most of it, completely out of the area. So it was not defended at all. And as you said, there's so much surveillance on that wall that, as you said, even a mouse or a mosquito would trip it and would send an alarm. So when they bulldoze this, if they weren't allowed to do this, allowed by Israel or by whoever's controlling this agenda, we'll talk about that, there's no way they could have entered. No way.
That's the key.
Let's get Victor's thoughts on this.
Can you hear Victor?
Hey guys. Yeah, I hear you fine. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I hear you good.
All right. So, Regis, I wanted to thank you for having me on your show. And Rich, I wanted to say you're not joking when you say that a rodent couldn't get through. They now have the technology that they can strap weapons onto robotic insects that could penetrate underground. And of course, Israel knew that. So they actually have devices that can check not only if a roach is penetrating, but also seismic defenses for anything going on underneath. And then when you realize that they are receiving, it's got to be, I don't even know how many billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money to create what's called one of the best defenses in the world. There's no way that guys in paragliders with lawnmower engines could have penetrated that wall, which I witnessed with my own eyes and walked around when I visited Gaza Strip, and I played with the children as a child myself, and I was in Syria and in Jordan and that whole area, so I'm quite familiar with it. And even back then, which was decades ago, that place was not easy to come in and out of. So now it's even worse. So that whole thing is, by definition, a false flag. A lot of people think a false flag means that people didn't die. That doesn't mean that people didn't die. But like you were mentioning, Regis, as someone who served at the U.S. Naval Academy, the elite leadership laboratory taught by some of the best military leaders in the world, something like that would never happen if you follow the rules and regulations. So this was by design, because everything in the military is checks. You have to sign off on everything. It's constant. That's how they are able to maintain security. So there was a lapse in security that goes to the highest level. And what I noticed when I was in the military is that it tends to be somewhere up between the third and the fourth level. I mean, of corruption. So the top four, or the lowest four levels, are the ones where you will have difficulty as a whistleblower, which I was when I was at the Naval Academy. And so I saw that the abuse and the corruption was happening directly above me. So I went directly above that person. It turns out that person was in collusion with the person beneath him, but above me. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to the person above the other two. That person was also involved. So when you're a whistleblower, you got to realize that it's layers deep. And so whether you want to admit that what Israel and leaders of Israel have already admitted in public, that Hamas was funded by, again, the U.S. taxpayers who fund Israel. So this is all bad for soul currency, which is the real energy source of the universe. But getting back to the point there, yeah, Hamas is Mossad, is Israel. So this is, in fact, Israel's 9/11, in the sense that it's opening the world's eyes now, that the world has realized that September 11, 2001 was a false flag perpetrated by the same cast of characters that have perpetrated this, and also the forgotten Hawaii Holocaust, the murder ritual, the human sacrifice. World state Palestine after World War II, and what is about to happen in the Ukraine after they resolve whatever peace treaty they decide after this. This whole thing has been written down. Albert Pike wrote about the three wars, but the United Slaves of America have been so dumbed down, they don't realize they're knee deep in the Third World War.
Richard, I'm going to throw it over to you. What are your thoughts on
Well,
what
yeah.
Victor just said, and eventually we're going to get to who the hell is behind it.
Right. You know, Victor just hammered it when he said Albert Pike, because I had read about Albert Pike quite a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. But then I started, when I started seeing this and everything, I went back and I was looking at it. I go, oh man! I mean, this is step by step. It's right on Albert Pike, and he wrote that stuff in like 1890s or something like that.
Yeah,
So
what we're
really,
talking about here.
I think, yeah.
You're talking about the protocols of Zion.
Well, yeah, that's with it too, of course. Yeah, that's all part of it. Yeah, yep. There's the protocols of Zion, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I could go back to 1948 quickly here. As soon as they got in there, Begin come in there with his gang, a Stern gang, and they started killing in the bombings right away. They blew the British out of some hotel and other offices and stuff. If you look at your history, and I blame America and Britain for this whole thing starting, because once they went and sound that Balfour and took them all them years, and they allowed the Jews to go in there, and then Begin started that stuff. The Americans and the British should have went in there and stopped that, and because they had signed the Balfour Agreement says that they're supposed to live in peace with the Palestinians. It says it right in the Balfour Agreement. And they should have stopped it, but they didn't. They just, of course, we know because we were all run by them anyways. This all goes where we're talking about. The synagogue of Satan and Luciferians, man. It's just the bankers and their lot, this bloodline families. It goes back to them. They're the ones running stuff. You can deny it. You can call me conspiracy theory. I don't care. I'm just after the truth. And I want to expose them, because if not, we're really in serious trouble now. Every country is in serious. That's the stranglehold they got, and we're in serious trouble. People better wake up, because I got to tell you something. What they have planned for the future is not nice, not at all. Just look at the Georgia Guidestones and some other things, and you'll understand.
Well, Richard, you mentioned several things there that are going to probably be incomprehensible to a lot of people, and we'll come back to some of this. But right now, I want to ask you, and then I'm going to throw it right over to Victor. What is the goal? What is the purpose behind this false flag, Richard? There's got to be an agenda. What is it that somebody unseen wants to accomplish?
Well, you got to understand, I'm not talking about the real Jews in Israel, the Torah Jews. I'm not talking about them, and even some of the Zionist Jews. But the ones that are in charge are the Ashkenazi and the Khazarians, and they're crypto Jews. They're fake Jews. They're not really Jews. They're lying to everybody. They use them as pawns. They didn't mind killing their own people. They didn't mind taking 3,000 people out in New York. Hey, sometimes they say you got to break a few eggs to make a scrambled egg sandwich. That's their attitude. And I'm sorry, but that's the way it is.
So, what is it they wanted to accomplish, Richard? What was the goal of the false flag?
Well, a number of things. One thing for sure, not mentioned much in the early 2000s, there was a massive natural gas field right off the coast of Gaza, which would enrich the people in Gaza and actually turn it into there's a lot, let's just say, and there was many, I think they said there was at least 1 trillion feet of just a really huge field, and it's there. So, who's standing in the way of that field? The Zionists now, they're drilling there and stuff anyways, okay? So, you got legally, the Palestinians own that, unless they just happen to not be in Gaza no more. You know, that's one reason. The other reason is these are fanatics. These Chabad Lubavitchers are fanatics. They live that Talmud. And if you understand the Talmud, anybody who thinks I'm lying, look at the Talmud and look at what they say about the rest of the people, the Goy. You look at it, okay? And you tell me what's going on. They want us gone. They are inhuman. Really look at the Talmud and you tell me what's going on. That's all I got to say with that. That's what's going on. They don't care. They want to like what they want to. Here's the real thing right now in the immediate future. Get rid of them out of there. Get rid of that Gaza problem, because that's been a problem, and it's been nothing but a disgusting 17-year concentration camp of swallow. Okay, and the whole world is sick and tired of this operation going on over here. This Israel is not just for Jews. It's owned by Rothschild. It's Rothschild Zionism that's doing this, okay? But what they do is they have what they call, I think in the 80s, sometime around the 80s, there was a thing called the Odeanan Plan that was written up by the Jews. I call them the Jews, but let's just say the Luciferian Talmudic Zionists that say that they want a greater Israel area for themselves, which goes all the way up to the Tigris River. Look at a map. All of Lebanon's gone. Damascus, most of Syria is gone. Parts of Iraq is gone. Jordan's gone on this new map. They want that. The Russians came in there and stopped that, the killing over there. This ISIS. ISIS is run by the Israelis and the Americans. They're financed by all the central banks in Syria. That's what they want. They're not going to give up this. They're not going to give up this Greater Israel project. So they were very angry at Russia for coming in there and taking care of business. So what do? They'll start a war with Ukraine and keep the Russians occupied over there, and we'll keep our Greater Israel project. That's the future right now. That's what's happening right now. The Greater Israel project, and of course getting rid of Palestinians. The West Bank is their next thing too. They'll slaughter them in there now. That's right, about it. Okay.
Let's flip it over to Victor. Flip it over to Victor. What are Victor's thoughts?
I see it first as an artist. I don't paint with the broad brush, and I'm not diminishing the value of what Richard said, but there are in fact enough people who self-identify as Jews that know exactly what Rich is talking about, who are educating people about what others who are afraid to come forward, and that fear that they have about speaking the way that Rich did and saying, hey, listen, I'm a Jew and I still don't believe in this. Just like if you were a Christian during the Crusades and you were like, hey, listen, I don't really agree with all this stuff, But anyway, from a different perspective, from a practical perspective, I can say that I actually visited the Georgia Guidestones and I read the recipe for population control. And I saw with my own eyes, it was written in granite on stone by artisans, and somebody paid a lot of money to have this put on government land in the United States. And I didn't believe it, so I had to actually go there and see it myself. And when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. But the first thing on that, what they call the Stonehenge of the United States, was it says to maintain the human population at 500 million. So right off the bat, it wants to diminish the population that we have now, which is anywhere from between 8.5 billion to 9 billion, to 500 million. That's eliminating over 95% of the population. Anyway, I found that to be disturbing, and so I documented it. You can find it actually on my BitChute channel, Victor Hugo Nostradamus 2020, and on Rumble at Victor Hugo Art News. I recommend you check it out because they actually blew up that monument. And just like the guy from January 6th that they still can't find, the pipe bomber, they still haven't found the guy who blew up the Georgia Guidestones, even though, again, I was there, and I can tell you there's cameras around there. So they know who did it. But again, who did this thing? Who's behind this? It's the handful of people who some people don't even think they're human because they don't have the capacity to feel any kind of sympathy or compassion, and they eat children. So one of the things that people have to start coming to terms with, which is the hardest thing, and apparently it's so difficult that people are going to have to learn it the hard way, unfortunately. And so if the new normal is, well, you kill 100 of our people, so we murder 2 million of yours, if that's going to become the new norm and nobody's going to put their emotions aside and say, okay, well, wait a minute, let's see. I saw some bodies that supposedly were murdered at a peace music concert, but where else is the verification on that? Then everybody was talking about 40 beheaded babies, and then it turns out that it was just a reporter who didn't do her job and was overtaken with the emotion of an Israeli soldier who maybe he was joking around or whatever, and he said, hey, listen, yeah, it's so bad, these beasts, they decapitated 40 babies, you know? And so she got all emotional and started practically crying. So it's just propaganda. I'm not saying that dead babies and beheaded babies are a good thing at all. But what I'm saying is, what about the missing children from the Hawaii Holocaust, which is by definition a Holocaust? Holocausts are happening all around us, and the Jews don't have the trademark and copyright on the word Holocaust. So what's happening is now on the world stage, the world is realizing, wow, there's a lot of similarities to things that are happening in Lahaina, Hawaii, with the land grab there, which is Talmudic, because besides what Richard exposed about the Talmud, the primary thing that gets my concern is that its basis is that you can use lies to circumvent the Goy, the Gentiles. So right off the bat, if you, Regis, had invited me on your show and you told me that this show was basically a show full of lies, I don't really think I'd want to be on your show, because lying isn't a good thing. And they've tried to normalize lies to the point where the Goy, the Gentiles that are being lied to, are now accepting it as normal. It's completely inverted. It's completely satanic. So it's so many different levels when you say who's doing this. But it's financed by the Babylonian magic trick, which is the occult. And it's an illusion, and people are overtaken with greed on it. I want to mention, I had a conversation with Kyler Davenport on a show in the United States, and I told him that I thought it was evil people at the very top that were using this Babylonian magic trick to construct these false flag events to bring upon the Book of Revelation, the Antichrist, because they believe this really is all biblical. I'm sure, Regis, you know that. But the point being is that, yeah, I actually lost my train of thought there. But yeah, I think, oh yeah, what he said was that he doesn't believe in evil. And I thought that was interesting because I'd never had anybody tell me that they didn't believe in evil. He goes, no, it's not about evil. He said these people are not even human beings. He believes they're aliens. And so, we're now getting into a point where people are just questioning everything. I think this is the age of the Laku generation, because regardless of how you feel about me and what I'm saying right now, there's things in what I'm saying right now that I'm sure you've thought of before. And now you're realizing at the very least that you're not alone. And so that is, to me, the apocalypse, which is an awakening which is a revelation, which I think we're all living through right now. So it's an amazing time to be alive, and I'm loving every minute of it. I think this has so far been a great apocalypse.
Well, you both have mentioned satanic forces. If that's not exactly what you said, but evil forces. I watched a video by David Icke today. He said some really important things. Right off the bat, flat out, he said, if you believe this, you're not really alive. You don't know what's going on. It is a false flag. He flat out said it. Basically said the same things that both of you were saying. But David Icke said this, and I think this is really important. If you are aware or you suspect that this is a false flag, that it is not what it appears to be, he said you cannot take sides. And I thought that was profound. You cannot take the side of Israel, because they had a right to defend themselves and they were attacked and they were murdered, blah, 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 blah. He said, nor can you take the side of the Palestinians and Hamas or Hezbollah, because he says it's all been orchestrated. I think the two of you were saying that as well.
Right.
And I think what David Icke said and where he went with this, and he went to it very quickly because he's talked about this and written about this in several books. I've been familiar and aware of him for some time now. Victor mentioned that they're not human. They're maybe aliens. David Icke said they're a cult, a satanic cult that controls both sides, Israel and Hamas. And he said it's a global cult that is running the world. And as Richard said, its goal, and Victor as well, is total domination. It's depopulation for sure, but complete and total domination. I'd like to connect this. We could go on for a long time about who these satanic people are and what they do. But I'd like to connect what we've been talking about with Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum, his cabal of billionaires, politicians, business people, corporations held every year in Davos. They state very clearly what they want. They don't try to hide it. They talk about, we want to control the world. And if you read their documentation, it's right there on their website. It says, people around the world are seeing nothing but chaos, wars, death, dying, climate change. And you can go on and on and on. I mean, even the issues like LGBTQ, religions about, not religions about, God, I just stumbled all over myself there. What they've done is they've taken all of these crises and they've said, we have a solution for these. And their solution, is to use these crises to convince us that something else is going on, that they're helping us, that they're our friends. But what they're really after is world domination. They want us to have nothing. They tell us that we will be happy. You will not need anything. And you will eat insects.
Yeah.
Now, this is terrifying enough. But when people begin to discover what we're talking about tonight and beginning to lay out, is that everything going on in the world today is being controlled by this cult. And David Icke made it very clear, as did Richard, It's the Rothschilds. And it
Well,
goes back several hundred years. They are the Zionists. They are the Khazarians. They are purely evil. Richard, back to you to see what you have to say about that.
well, the Rothschilds are the working group for them. Some people say they're not even really. No, they're the order takers for ones even higher. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this guy Klaus Schwab. I love hearing him because boy, he just comes right out and exposes everything and see, they have a thing. These Satanists and Luciferians, they have a thing. It's called lesser magic, and what they do is so they don't have to get bad karma from the higher source, God. They have to tell us what they're going to do, or in movies or other stuff. Just watch the Simpsons, and you got about a 20-year thing of what went on between 911 and that. So if they tell us what they're going to do right out in front, as arrogant as they are, then they just say, well, if you're going to sit by and accept that, great, beautiful. You're going to eat bugs. We're going to kill all your cows because the cows have flatulence, or you can't eat meat again, or you want your meat. We're going to shove it. You're going to inject mRNA for all you people that didn't want to take it. So every time you eat meat, you're going to or produce in America, I think it is in other places too. You're going to get some of our DNA altering stuff, whatever it is. So, and you know what? I mean, what gets to me is they're going to tell you, you're going to sit around and eat bugs, or in other words, you look at what happened in Lahaina, and it's absolutely some sort of exotic weapon that was done there. Absolutely. So listen, this is not the first time. It happened in Paradise, California, Santa Rosa fires. I can go on about Gatlinburg, Tennessee, in Portugal, worldwide, okay? New Zealand and Australia too, I think Australia. But what I'm getting at is, it's what we're going to have to do is do a January 6th in the United States, but with 1 million people. Go down to the Pentagon, don't let them go to work, crowd that place, and start getting some answers of who did this in Lahaina. They don't know? Well, then they fired. They're freaking fired. You know what I'm saying to you? Come on, get some guts. You got guns in America, your Second Amendment. I'm not telling you to shoot anybody, but you've got 1 million people there, 2 million get on there with guns. I think you might get some sort of response. It's getting to that point. And it's another point, too, is the people that want to go along to get along or just are mum about everything, they don't want to talk about it. They're as guilty as these scumbags, these Luciferians, because they, by not speaking out and exposing, they're part of it. They're allowing it. And our kids and our grandkids, what are you going to say to them when they're coming along and you're going to eat bugs and you'll have a great 2 or 3 months that they allow you and then they'll put you in a FEMA cam and they'll fry you. That's what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Get real here. These people were like the Nazis and the whatever. They're not nice. They're anti-human trash. But they are pretty deceptive, and they're really good at deception. And they've been around for 3,000 or 4,000, who knows how many years, since the Pharisees, since Canaanites and Cain and Abel, whatever, cannibal with Moloch, and all this. This is where it goes back thousands and thousands of years. That's why they're so rich too, because they've just been doing this deception and collecting up all this wealth and everything over all them years. So they got, that sort of stuff, I just want to send from your last question, I think it's important, and not to, when you said, what do I think, why is this going on? That I should have remembered, but I'm kind of brain fogging tonight. I think too is Netanyahu was in deep political trouble. There was million people on the streets, or hundreds of thousands almost every day. The people in Israel have had it with him. You know what I mean? He's so he had making this war was about the only thing he could do to get them off his back. That's what I think is happening too. The political situation in Israel. The people in Israel, they have been shot up. How many times would most of them most of them have got 4 to 5 shots in Israel. Yeah, I mean, so tell me about they care about their population, So I didn't want to drop that up, but Netanyahu was in deep political trouble. They want to put him in jail.
Let's throw it back. Let's throw it back to Victor.
What would you like to know?
About Klaus Schwab and his merry guys of Davos, and you will listen, you will be shot. One of those deals.
I agree with you,
you will eat
because
about
I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right. Those guys that you see, the Klaus Schwabs, the Justin Castro, Trudeau, the Joe Biden, those guys are just the puppets for the black nobility, for the people that you don't even see, for the Vatican, for the Jesuits. That attack that just happened coincided with Friday the 13th, which was have to do with the banking system. Again, you follow the money, and most people don't remember the history of what Friday the 13th was all about, and with the Jesuits, and how they're right now literally in the Vatican. So I have this, as an artist, I think tangentially, and I think creatively, like these psychopaths or Satanists or aliens that are basically spending their time on this earth, which is precious, developing unique ways in which to get humans to murder each other and themselves for this wasteless, actually this illusion, this Babylonian magic trick, this money it's basically debt slavery. The whole system is now being exposed. So what's happening is, as the people wake up and realize that they are debt slaves, I start realizing this has happened before in history. And when you look back in history, I know this sounds bizarre, but you can always count on there being a donkey involved in the history. From the poisoning of the wells, when people wanted to take over a village, and what they did was they just put lead in the well, and then they came back a year or two later, and the people in the village went mad and just killed each other. And then they just came in after the horror and just took over the place like parasites. And these people have been doing this for years, and you're not allowed to say who they self-identify as, otherwise you won't be allowed on this live stream, or this, I don't even know what this is called. All I know is I'm trying to be as politically correct as possible, because even just to log in to have this conversation with your audience, the reason they can't see me was because I'm not a member of YouTube or Facebook, because I was permanently issued a digital death sentence on both for daring to question the hidden history that we're all being force-fed as truth, which is really just a bunch of lies that are based on this Talmudic existence that we're not being forced to live with, but that we're accepting. And I think people are starting to wake up to that, and they're seeing that it's not just about a religion, because like I said, the Jesuits are in the Vatican. The Pope is a Jesuit, and the Rothchilds are also in the Vatican. The Vatican, I think, at once controlled the banks, but I think they actually called the gold back in. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. Suffice to say, I think like these people, because in keeping this Diary of the World on canvas that I called Modern Archons of Journalism, I've met a lot of these people who are the ones who pull the strings behind the scenes, and they share these things with me. And a lot of them are difficult because there's some horrors that these people think of. You got to realize, I mean, if your life is spent, you have all that money, and you could spend it on feeding children and housing people, and instead you figure out ways of like paying Fauci to lie and paying the Prime Minister of England to lie, and just darkness, evil. So anyway, there's always a donkey involved, because in order to get people to do something, if they won't do it one way, they'll threaten you with your family, and if not, they'll say, okay, well then bring out the donkey. And nowadays they film you, and then they say, okay, if you say anything or you don't do what we say, we'll show this video of you with the donkey. There was even an episode on something called The Black Mirror, where the Prime Minister had sex with a pig, and they filmed it. So this is not like out of the norm, but people can't have discussions like this because they're like, oh my God, that's so disgusting, vulgar. And like I said, for me to even say this, we're thinking outside the box to circumvent the censorship. And that's what's cool about this, is that this evil that exists, like Richard was saying, the light is shining on the darkness, but the way that the light shines on the darkness is through artists, because artists have the divine inspiration that God gives us, because God is an artist. And so when they censor us, like this live stream that you're listening to, I don't even know the name of it. It's such a shame. But yeah, we circumvented the YouTube, Facebook discrimination against truth-sayers, and you can hear my voice. And then the other thing I want to quickly show is the Milli Vanilli effect, which is interesting. I'm learning these things as I'm going along through this apocalypse, because I'm seeing how it all makes sense, from Albert Pike to Milli Vanilli. They started weakening the men. I call it the pussification of men, if I can. And what they did was, in the 80s, they brought around this band called Milli Vanilli, who was based completely on a lie and on the Babylonian magic. They had these black guys who had great voices, made some great music, but they looked too black. So then they got these two Obama-looking guys with long hair, kind of effeminate, to dance around stage and make pretend that they were the ones who were singing, but the whole thing was a lie. And the people, even when they found out it was a lie, it's almost like they preferred to be lied to than to be told the truth. And that's the brainwashing and manipulation and everything that these people of the world right now, particularly in the Western world, seem to be, unfortunately, like mind poisoned with. So I think they're going to snap out of it. I'm praying that they do. I think shows like what you're doing, Regis, and Rich, you having the guts to say the things that you're saying, I think the future generations will look back on this and thank us for having the integrity to dare to think outside of the box. And now we need that more than ever, because in order to survive the apocalypse, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I've never been through an apocalypse before. So far, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of cool, actually, because I'm learning a lot of stuff. But really, this should kind of be the last apocalypse, I think.
Wow. We talk about the apocalypse. You know, we're thinking back to the Old Testament, to the scriptures. And I'll finish with this particular insight. In the scriptures, we found that there were good angels and bad angels. They were the fallen ones. And the scriptures are telling us about God and Satan. And these battles of good and evil, we can see throughout all of human history, way before the Jewish Old Testament was ever written, and it borrowed from all of that prehistory. But as we look at it all, it has been a battle of good against evil. And the question that a lot of people want to have answered is, well, when is God going to come back and strike Satan dead, remove him, not allow his influence to continue to dictate what's going on in the world today, to lose lies and deception? That's what the devil, the characteristics of the devil are: lies and deception. And I think that's what we can see in what we've been talking about tonight. It's all been a stream of lies and deception that has corrupted, that has undermined anything that was good in human existence. And that means our basic humanity, with all of this LGBTQ stuff, transgenders, they've really undermined and destroyed, taken over religions. You mentioned the Vatican, you mentioned the Pope. Well, that has been their goal, to use religion to ensnare people, to deceive them about what is really happening. And Victor, as you said, they never show us what's behind the scene that they've presented to us. Listen, before we go, I want to give you each the last shot, and we're going to continue these discussions again very soon. This stuff needs to be exposed. Victor, we'll go to you first. Your last thoughts before we finish tonight.
My last thoughts are that we chose to be here at this moment in time, which is quite literally biblical. Enjoy it, learn from it. There's so many past generations that never had the ability to experience what we're experiencing, because ultimately what Regis I took from what you said is people are waiting for God to come and stop Satan, because they have forgotten that God is in each one of them, and God has given us free will. And so in order for us to stop Satan, we just have to say no. And so it's really simple. It's living by the golden rule. You take the 10 commandments, like George Carlin said, and you wrap them up into one and just treat others the way you'd want to have yourself treated. And finally, don't live in fear, is what I'm learning in this apocalypse. Again, the apocalypse is not an end. It's actually a new beginning. We're either going to go into a real dark age, which will be really, really on a level of hell on earth that most people probably can't even imagine. But I don't see it that way. I think that's going to be a temporary thing. I have faith in humanity. I don't believe that we're all evil. I think evil is taking over the media. But just like with what we're doing right now, people may not see me, but they hear me. And what we're saying is out into the ether right now. And the ether is real. You can't see it, but it's real. So right now there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of hatred. And we could change that. Again, don't wait for God to come. God's already inside of you. God's in your mind, in your heart, in your soul. Soul currency. Keep the soul currency flowing by keeping positive energy and moving forward. And in order to move forward, you have to live, you have to love, and you have to flow. And that's all I got to say. Keep shining.
Richard.
Yep. Well, yeah, amen to that. Yeah, well, let's first off, the Russians and the Chinese are both come out and said that the threats that Israel has said of what they were going to do is annihilate them all. They were saying that's, pretty much a little bit outrageous, considering. So that, hoping that other bigger countries like India and other countries are get on the bandwagon and really get on them about that and just stop that. Let's just think about what you're saying here, and kind of squash the hate, the whole anger and the hatred, because it's not going to lead to anything good, But like Victor said, though, unfortunately, technology has gotten to a point that it's overcome spirituality so much that it's just so one-sided that on a scale, it's like, but the technology is a lot of times is in the hands of people who don't really have the I am presence within their body, what's in their soul. They have it, but they won't recognize it. They will only recognize their subconscious. Where the subconscious, what it does is it really runs your body on automatic. But people should understand that there's a I am presence in every one of us, every human being. I think animals too, especially dogs and cats. All you gotta do is look in their eyes. But this I am presence is not only the God particle and that in your body, but you're part of a whole vast universe. So you're not that limited. You know, that gets into Diane and all of that, but you know, but that's all I want to say is that hope there, you know, just recognizing who you are. You're more than just a meat body, you know, just flesh, you know, you're more than your body. I don't believe you die. You just go on to another reality. So maybe they can give us people hope, but hope there may be some hope in here. But you know, this whole thing I get, you know, by them sending a couple of carrier groups over there just so they can stop it. Might be a good idea, might be a real bad idea. You know, what's their intention? You know, what's their intention?
It's all part of the play. It's all part of the circus.
Yeah. The only thing too is the poor sailors on them ships, you know, the Iranians could take those aircraft carrier now are nothing but they're floating sitting ducks, you know. I mean, yeah, they'll be able to take some missiles out. They have hypersonic stuff. The Iranians got some pretty good stuff. You know, they didn't waste their money on because people laugh to go, oh, the Ukrainians, they're still flying F-14s or something like that. Yeah. But they a lot like the Russians. They went along on the missile technology and stuff. They got some pretty good stuff now. So that's all I could say. You got to have some hope there, but people can't just sit around and not do nothing. You got to get on and getting on your congressman. You call, give him an email. Get on him, him or her. Tell me, screw you and your war hawk. If you want to be a big war hawk, send you and your kids over there. Go ahead. You know, that's what you should do. These chicken hawks really get to me. I'm a U.S. veteran, okay, and they really get to me. These people, boy, it's a lot easier to send somebody over there that's from another part of town, ain't it? You know, I ain't no. Remember that old song from Creedence? I ain't no senator's son. You know, and that's, you know, what are they talking about? They're talking about fighting China and Russia in a war, and our kids being drafted and stuff. I don't think America's ready for it, and then, you know, financially they're not.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this in conclusion for tonight, but it's not the final word. I think that more and more people are beginning to wake up. I think that this false flag, it's being revealed for what it is becoming obvious to a lot of people. A lot of people connected the dots already about 9/11. I've read, and I don't know for sure, but I know that supposedly a majority of the people in the United States no longer believe that it was a bunch of Arabs that flew those planes supposedly into the towers in the Pentagon. They pretty much are starting to believe that it was their government behind it and that there were Israelis behind it. So I think there's cracks that are beginning to appear in their play, in their circus, in their performance. I think their cracks are beginning to show up. I think we've talked about fear, and fear has been one of these occult people have used on humanity forever. You know, if you do bad things, you go to hell. If you do good things, what we tell you, oh, you'll be saved. So fear is a big thing. And I think this is what people need to be able to do, is to overcome the fear of being rejected by your family, by your peers, by your employment. This is one of the most powerful tools that they have used against us. Fear of stepping out and being rejected and alienated. Victor talking about that. We can all talk about that. I think it's so common now that anybody who, for example, takes the side of Russia, they are going to be isolated and excommunicated from their groups. We've all experienced that.
Yeah.
So I think there is hope. And I would tie it back to what I think Victor was saying, that as people are beginning to come aware, okay, they're stepping out. More and more people are stepping out. And all we have to do is to say no to evil and not being afraid of being rejected. Richard, Victor, we got to continue these discussions around the issues we've been talking about. We don't have to talk about food scarcity. We don't have to talk about wars. We are zeroing in on what is really going on and who's behind it. And there's a lot deeper that we can go. Thank you for this difficult, scary, frightening discussion, but it has to happen, and it has to happen fast and be widespread.